It was scary. You don't know because you think it's going to be like what it is in the movies. Yeah. And when you get there, it kind of is like it at first. And then in the feds, it's totally different. It's like a college campus, but you're around dangerous people. People are carrying around knives and people, you think they're your friends, but they're really not. And everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a motive.
In prison?
In prison.
Wow.
Everyone is working an angle because they want to do what they have to do to hustle for themselves, provide for themselves, and protect themselves. Every single person has a motive and an agenda in there.
Hi guys, welcome back to a new episode of Dare to Be Fearless. So last week, actually, now that this episode will have aired, was a very special day called Wrongful Conviction Day. And I talk a lot now about being involved with the Innocent Project and spending a lot of my spare time when I'm not working really involved with justice reform and predominantly helping kids whose parents were incarcerated. So everything surrounding prison and justice reform I find really fascinating, and I think there's a lot that needs to be shifted and changed in the world. But my guest today I found a long time ago through a documentary that I saw. So before I introduce him in, make sure to follow Dare to Be Fearless on social media at Dare and the number 2 Be Fearless, as well as my personal social media, which is at Alexa_Curtis. And of course, if you want to know more about Chief Swag Officer, you can find that on social media, as well as our official website, which we'll have launched by now, chiefswagofficer.com. So, Ian Bick, I found you and your story 2-3 years ago because I had seen a documentary that at the time was on HBO Max called Generation Hustle. You were how old when this story started?
That was a great intro.
Thank you.
I'm proud of you.
I know.
So that's like, how you found me, from HBO Max at the time.
I can't remember. And what did I do? DM you?
You DM me, yeah. Okay. And then we went to that place in
West Hartford.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They were like under fire, like legally recently.
I consulted for this particular person that won't be named, but we know, and she screwed me out of a lot of money. This was earlier this year. Okay. Yeah.
That's like a hip place though.
Yeah, it's a hip place.
And then they put the duckies in the drink, and I was like shocked about the duckies.
And then I saw behind the scenes what was going on, and I was like, oh man. And then if you screw me over with money, I'm like, this is not, that's how you know. But I think that location is still open.
Gotcha. But yeah, thanks for having me. I got indicted when I was, 19 by the FBI, IRS, postal inspectors. But, I started in the business at a young age, working catering for my dad, and then going into house parties, club events, concerts, and eventually owning my own nightclub right in Danbury. I call this Danbury. This is Richfield, but feels like kind of full circle because, I down there booking big acts like 5 minutes away, and now I'm here booking big acts, but in a podcast world, and like everything in my life has brought me to this moment.
So what exactly happened? But from the beginning, you grew up in Connecticut, right?
Yeah, I was born in New York City, grew up in Connecticut, and born and raised here right down the road. Private, gated Jewish community.
So you grew up rich?
Middle class, I would say. Family vacations, family movie nights, family dinners. We had a dog. I have a brother, mom and dad. Went to private school a couple of years because I was bullied. In like elementary school, but that was like the family dynamic, very supportive, loving parents. So you
went to private elementary school, but not high school?
It was Montessori school, like fourth, where they have 4th through 8th grade in one classroom.
Is it every Montessori school private? Because you have to pay to go to Montessori school.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's called Montessori school. It's different than like a private Catholic school or anything like that. And 4th through 8th grades in one classroom. And then 7th grade, I went back to public middle school. 7th and 8th grade, public school. High school, public school.
I grew up on the other side of Connecticut.
And the rich side.
No, you grew up on the rich side.
No, this is not the rich side. That's Richfield.
No, but I'm the other side. I'm from Willimantic area. Willimantic is the heroin capital.
Really?
You're kidding, right? Because that's the fucking poor side.
Some people are rich out there, though.
I think you're talking about like West Hartford. Okay. I'm from like really the not rich
part.
The sticks. This is actually closer to rich. Because you're closer to like Greenwich, Darien. I'm like 3 hours. I may as well fly to Darien than drive. It's like it's that far. But whenever people are like, oh, you grew up in Connecticut, people always just assume you grew up really rich. So I don't know, do people think that about you when you're talking to them?
Yeah, I mean, people think with my background and like that I got everything handed to me and whatnot, but I always worked hard. Like when I wanted a new like Xbox or PlayStation or even my first car, I worked for that.
Yeah.
You know, I had a job or I would hustle and do lemonade stands or whatever I had to do. I've always worked my whole life. It was never handed. Did we grow up with like nice birthday parties and stuff like that? Yes. But it's not like I was given like a Ferrari on, my 16th birthday party,
That's rich.
Yeah.
So you open this nightclub, right? And you have some major acts come in. Who are some of the people who were performing at this time?
Well, so even before that, like I was in the concert business, but overall throughout my career, in that short-lived career, I've booked Tyga, Chief Keef, Big Sean, Steve Aoki, Adventure Club, The Chainsmokers, YG, Yellow Claw, 21 Savage, Zomboy, like big names, all from, when I was 16 years old till when I went to prison at 21.
How did you get them to pay attention to you as a 16-year-old?
So in the concert business, like the podcast business, everyone always says like you need that one big guest before you could book, like you need a track record. So, the hard thing about that's like a catch-22. How do you get that first big guest? And I'd gotten lucky. There was these co-concert promoters that did a show, had some connections, paid a little bit more money, and got Big Sean, and I got to put my name on that. And because my name was on that, then you go to the next one. Hey, I booked Big Sean, and it just builds up and builds up and builds up. It's like the podcast business now that I've had like Chevy Chase and Brandon Novak on from Jackass. I could start to go around and say, hey, I've had X, Y, and Z on the show. And you use that as like a Rolodex.
Yeah, it's a small world too. I feel like in that particular industry of podcasting, I mean, there's so many people out there, but when you're talking about getting celebrities on or bigger names, I mean, a lot of them are represented by the same people and whatnot. Okay, so you do this for how long before the FBI shows up at your door?
So I've lived like so many acts. Like I went to doing teen parties, which was a super successful business, making 10 grand, a night in high school once a month.
That's insane.
House parties, all of that. Then I went into the concert business. That's where I lost all the money and got into trouble because I lied about it.
Why did you lie?
I liked being liked. And I didn't want to, feel hated or like bullied again. I was becoming popular, and I had built a successful business. But I made the decision to lie and cover it up, and that would come back to bite me later on because once you tell one lie, you have to keep telling lies. And I lied about the losses and the money. When all I had to do was be honest, and everything would have been fine. But I felt bad because I lost friends and family money. But we wouldn't be here today had I been honest, because everything that transpired was a domino effect and gave me the life I have now. So in hindsight, it's crazy to look at. And then I lied. That all happens. Long story short, FBI starts investigating after the local police kind of kick it up. And then there's this investigation going on. But it gets crazier because while this investigation is going on, I get the idea to open Tuxedos again, which has nothing to do with the case. Was perfectly
the name of the club?
Tuxedo Junction, I get the idea to open that again and run it while I'm on trial. Like there was a point where I was literally on trial and then running this nightclub, booking these acts.
Why in that time frame? Do you think a lot of that was because you were just young and naive? Because I look back at things I've done in my career or people I've gotten into business with, and I'm like, if I knew what I know now, I would never have done it. But there's other things I've done where I'm like, wow, I really just wanted to like screw around and see how far I could get.
Yeah, I've made a ton of mistakes. No. You still make mistakes as you're older, you learn from them. I don't make the same mistakes I made back then. I just learn through them, and you find a way to keep going, and you just keep pushing forward. And I make mistakes to this day, but they're not on the level that they were before. And I know I have better understanding what's right and wrong, what's bad business versus good business, and I just keep chugging along. And, it was a learning lesson. It was one of the best learning lessons you could ever get.
And you then went to prison, correct?
Yeah, I went to trial, lost a trial, got my bond revoked later on, and ended up getting a 3-year federal prison sentence.
In Connecticut?
I went to prison kind of all over. I was in New Jersey, I was in New York, I was in Philadelphia.
Was this because why all these different states?
I got caught with like a cell phone on a cell phone footage at the first one, so they shipped you. They put you through this thing called diesel therapy. I ended up back in my hometown in Danbury, where Orange is the New Black is based on.
Yeah.
I was there, but then I dated a guard's cousin like 2 years prior, so he reported it was a conflict of interest that I dated his cousin, and he's been to my house for like a dinner one night.
In what, high school you dated this girl?
No, after high school, but while the case was going on. He reported it. He was like a super cop. They put me in the shoe in solitary. Then they shipped me out to Wisconsin. I went to Chicago. I went to Oklahoma City, and I spent a year at a federal prison camp in Wisconsin.
And was this maximum? No.
No, I started at a low, and then I went to a camp for the last year. That's like, Club Fed.
What is that?
Club Fed, you got a volleyball court, you got the basketball court, people had cell phones. It was the Four Seasons of prison. This was a resort, a country club.
Because my dad he was wrongfully convicted, but when I was really young, 7, so I grew up going and visiting him in maximum security prison, which was awful. So I can't even imagine what like minimum was, but I'm more curious about like your age, because you were so young to be in there for like a crime that was, yes, very serious, but like nowhere near a murder or anything. So do you remember the first few months and the days, how you got yourself through it?
Yeah, I mean, I was 21 and I was picked on a lot in there, and it was you have to be mentally tough to survive in there. You have to kind of think on your feet, and you can't really show emotions, but it was scary. You don't know, because you think it's going to be like what it is in the movies, and when you get there, it kind of is like it at first, and then in the feds, it's totally different. It's like a college campus, but you're around dangerous people. People are carrying around knives, and people, you think they're your friends, but they're really not, and everyone has an agenda. Everyone has a motive.
In prison?
In prison.
How?
Everyone is working
Why?
an angle because they want to do what they have to do to hustle for themselves, provide for themselves, and protect themselves. Every single person has a motive and an agenda in there.
Did you then have to find one too?
Yeah, I created my own hustles. I was a cheesecake man. I sold cheesecakes in prison. I did different things. I gambled a lot. They called me McLovin in prison.
Why?
Because I look like McLovin. And Squints from The Sandlot. I don't look like McLovin to you?
I mean, I don't, it's hard to like picture like you being called that in prison and then like real life, like kids telling you that in like
people call me, I have McLovin tatted right
Yeah,
here.
no, it's cute. So when you were going through the process with the trials and stuff, I mean, did you learn anything about prosecutors or like juries, the justice system during that? Do you feel like you had been treated fairly, or like you were given a tougher sentence to prove a point? I
think it's definitely like a corrupt system. Like if you go up against the feds, it's really hard to win because it's all of these resources against you. They're not looking to cut a good deal for you. All they care about is prison. They don't care about victims or anything like that. No. They say they do, but they really don't. All they care about is their conviction rate and making sure that person goes to prison. Otherwise, less people would go to prison. They're just looking at, they don't care about rehabilitation. Yeah. All they care about is solving the case and putting that person behind bars. I never would have went to trial. I never would have fought it if they gave me a fair deal. But I was a 19-year-old kid and they wanted prison from it, federal prison. And that was before I messed up my bond and did things I shouldn't have done. Even before that, they never gave me an opportunity to fix it. Yeah. They were out to get me from square one.
And why do you think that was?
I think I was larger than life. I had the nightclub, and I stood up to them. I said, I'm going to go to trial. Like, I didn't do what you guys are saying intentionally. I made mistakes. I lost money, but I never set out to steal from anyone intentionally like some of these other, pieces of shit out there. I didn't do that. It was all an accident.
Well, I think when your show came out on HBO, it was before like Inventing Anna and before like the Fire Festival with,
After Fire Fest.
It was after.
But before Inventing Anna, because they did an episode on Anna. But I think the HBO doc, for the first time in all the news articles written about me in pieces, the director did a fantastic job at showing, it made the government look bad. Like it showed like, this was all one big accident that spiraled out of control. And yes, I made a ton of mistakes and I shouldn't have lied. But it was all like, I thought I was doing the right thing. I really just wanted to protect my friends and family. And it just got out of control. And I thought they did an awesome job at showing my side of the story for the first time.
Which is very rare, because in a lot of these cases, I mean, Anna in particular, because I've seen a lot of stuff, come out about her. And obviously, I think the problem is her not being able, there's no remorse or like connection to be able to, like, you're watching her and you're like, is this real? Like, it's almost
She gives
infatuating.
no fucks.
But it's right? Emotionally, like she's not even trying to like connect with you. She doesn't care. I mean, what you did was so different, but you obviously like you care because you're willing to say like, I made a mistake. She won't even say like, I made a mistake. But then, yeah.
The problem I have with Anna is that people idolize her because she's a woman that had this, right? But I'm, received poorly among people for being the guy that went to prison. I think that's not right. Because if anything, her thing is worse than mine because she did that intentionally. And she's from a different country who came here and did that, But she's on Dancing with the Stars.
Insane.
She's on all the, well, she's off now, but she's just not, her personality is not great in that sense,
When I saw her get that, and I know her publicist, Kelly, quite well from like years ago when I was, and I don't know if it's her publicist or their friends or whatnot, but I was shocked when she backed her because it's like, there's so many places, like I can see almost more with, I'll be careful with what I say, with like Elizabeth Holmes with Theranos, right? Because the fact that this person almost screwed so many people over and almost people could have died, right? But she got to like Forbes billionaires list. Like that is an accomplishment. What Anna did is like there's no accomplishment there. So what do you feel like is wrong with society that her in particular, I mean, you're right. It's almost despicable that like she would get cast on an ABC, which is part of Disney, right? Like that is the antithesis of everything they're not. And you give so much attention to this person who should not have it.
Well, I don't think she should not have it. I think you should just be fair with second chances. I'm all for second chances. Great for her that she got that, but don't disqualify someone like me who has a platform that built the platform on his own from doing things. Because there's been plenty of casting opportunities I've been presented with, and when it gets to the end of the day, they don't want to cast me because I'm a felon or the prison thing, which was the best thing that could ever happen to me because I built my own platform and I have my own following and I didn't have anyone do that for me. So when my time does come to have my own show or whatever, it wasn't handed to me like Anna overnight. She got 1 million followers, But I think the world should just be more fair. And this has nothing to do with her. This is bigger than her, This is the world and society in general. I mean, look what they did to, what's her name? Gypsy.
Yeah.
Like she literally arranged for her mother to get killed. And I have nothing against Gypsy. She's hustling. She's doing her thing. Would love to have her on my show one day to give her a fair interview compared to like some of this other crap interviews that no one who's been to prison even understands what she went through. But that's the same thing. You're idolizing, you're giving her this huge platform and you're in this huge deal, but you're not doing the same for the other people that have gotten out of prison for way less charges.
Yeah.
That's not fair, you know?
What do you think is the biggest misconception then about going to prison? Like, what do you think is the biggest thing someone would think that's actually not true? About
prison itself or the people that go to prison?
Both.
I think about the people themselves is that, not everyone's a bad person at heart. And you really have to understand what they went through to get there. Like something my show focuses on is I always start at their childhood. So you learn everything about them, the struggles they went through. You learn to love that character before they committed the crime. So if you're hearing about how this person got raped or drugged or whatever, or they were born into an addiction family and then they committed that thing, you learn to fall in love with that character, and the news doesn't do that. No one does that, So that's what makes the show special, and it gives the underdog a chance. And then by the time you make it to their story about why they went to prison, you feel for them about everything they learned along the way. And when a person gets out of prison, there's no follow-up article unless you're like a celebrity. No one's saying what the person's doing now. And at every close of my episode, what are you doing now? What did you learn from it? What do you have to look forward to? It's a person's life story. And yes, you have to make it salacious and sexy to get the views and stuff. But these are mini documentaries we're creating for these people. And then the misconception about prison itself is that it doesn't always look like what it is on TV. And the system is so staggered and looks so different that, it's not streamlined. So it's a different experience for everyone. It's not a fair system. And it's a very dangerous place because of it's not streamlined everywhere.
Do you remember when you were in prison? Because these Connecticut towns, and I mean, me being from here as well, I mean, some of them are very tight-knit communities and everyone knows everyone. Were you really the talk of the town at that point?
Not when I
that
was in
happened?
prison. Yeah, not when I was in prison.
When it kind of started though, when they first like came to you, and then when you were basically waiting to get arraigned.
Yeah, the Danbury News Times they made me to be the devil,
Yeah.
you know? Even after prison, they still did that. They finally gave me a fair article like a year ago when, you know, I had to beg them to come to see what's going on. But they don't do that for everyone.
No.
And they just trash my name. The city officials, like, I do not like Danbury. I don't support Danbury. That's why my business is in Richfield, because they're not supportive of me. You know, the city hall's corrupt. The officials are corrupt. Because I saw firsthand what they all did, you know? And if they're, like, a lot of the politicians in Connecticut, they promote reentry or change, but when you ask them for a meeting, they won't meet with you. I've had one politician sit down with me, Julie Kushner, who actually took the time to see what I had going on. But then, like Representative Johanna Hayes, I asked her for a meeting. She's from Waterbury, from that crime-populated, you know, that they won't even meet with me. They said no.
Why?
Blanket. Because it's all corrupt. It's not, you know, and I have the emails. And I would never support someone like that does that. You can't preach one thing and then do another thing. And that's what goes on. In all of these other states, I go to Tennessee, I go to Kentucky, they welcome me into the prisons and the facilities. In Arkansas, where you grow up learning about these states from a state like Connecticut that they're tough on crime. And yeah, they're tough on crime, but they're actually doing something about rehabilitation. They want people to change, and Connecticut doesn't have that. Not one Connecticut prison has invited me to speak in their facility and try to change the narrative. Not one.
And you think that's specifically this state in particular?
I think it has a big part to do with it. I think they want to say that they're doing good and they want to help the system, but they're not. I mean, look at the juvenile probation system, you know? They stick people with like a mentor that doesn't really do much for them or anything like that. That's why I got involved with like the mentorship thing. They don't have anything to do. There's nothing to do in the state, in Connecticut. There's no help. There's no tools, you know? To them, it's all numbers. Who's the next person going into the prison? It's an unfair, broken system.
It's a business, which is like crazy that people don't realize that. So going back a second to what is one thing that people wouldn't also expect is true or not true about actually being in prison. Like there's the people in prison, and then what about the actual experience of being there? I mean, food or like what you're sleeping in or whatever compared to what you see on, say, TV.
I mean, it really all depends. Like state prisons, more like what you see on TV. Orange is the New Black did a good job at explaining like the women's federal. There's nothing that's really out there on men's federal, and you know there's like maybe penitentiary or maximum security prisons. But where I was a camp. It was cushy, you know. After I got to the low, that's not really showcased, and it's a fascinating world. I mean, we were literally smuggling in McDonald's on the weekends.
Do you have friends from that stuff?
Yeah, I had some guys, old bunkmates that were on the show, people that support me. Because they see what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah.
My platform is less about me now and more about the stories I showcase.
But in actual prison then, that camp seems like nice, but that first 2 years you were in like a...
Low security prisons.
Okay.
And it's because you have a mix of, you have a guy that did a murder sentence that worked his way down to a low, you know? You have a wide range of people.
That's crazy.
It's very, it's not well looked at, you know? They let too much go on.
Did you sleep well?
Yeah, I've always slept well. You know, I think I slept the worst of my life when I was running the club and that stress, and I was very overweight and I was eating unhealthy, you know, and you're always under that stress. But now I sleep better than ever. I mean, some nights if I'm traveling or something, it's hard to sleep, but I love my Mike Tyson edibles. I get high and I go to sleep.
But you don't have those in prison.
No, you don't have those. But I slept okay. You adapt. You learn, you adapt. I've always been someone that learns, adapts, grows, and moves forward. You know, I'm a survivalist in that sense. I figure it out, and I keep moving. I mean, when we first met, I didn't have a podcast. I was just starting social media, telling TikToks. I had just quit my job.
You had just told me about. I remember you were telling me like 2 years ago about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I was against having a podcast because everyone has a podcast, and it's so hard to break through in it. You know. And I got lucky. I came up with something no one had been doing before. Yeah. I'd learned to become good at what I do, and I just grind. Like, I do all my own editing. I do all my filming. I do everything. I do the socials, the clips. Yeah. You know, it's a nonstop grind. You know how it is. You're doing that with your business now. And that's what it takes, and I figured it out.
And your family, when this happened to you, because something I'm really fascinated about that I don't think a lot of people know about is kind of, I don't want to say the repercussions, but what happens to families when they have a family member who goes through the system, because it's obviously terrible for you, but there's a lot that the family has to experience. from hearings and trials and whatnot. I mean, how were your parents when this first started?
I mean, the family was definitely affected, because you have people in your community that are like, oh, that's, the parents of the kid that went to prison, and, relatives, family members. If like my mom, it was tough on her because she has all these relatives who have never been affected by the criminal justice system, and then to have a son go through that. It's tough. That whole experience, people don't, like I hear in all the people's stories I interview, their families are like the victims in a way too.
Yeah.
There's more than just the victims themselves that have become victims, and you're they always say in prison, your family, your loved one is kind of doing the bid with you. They're in prison with you.
Was there any probation period that you had to go through when you left prison, or you basically walked out and you were free to go?
No, I did 3 years probation. The first year was on house arrest, which half of that was during COVID, so the whole world was on house arrest.
Yeah.
I did that. I got off in 2022, got my passport back, quit my job a couple months later, and built this. And I've been doing this since January 23. I started the podcast. August 22, I started TikToks, and I'm just growing it. Now we have, almost 2 million people across all platforms, 700,000 listeners, and it just, it's constantly growing. I'm doing 5 episodes a week now.
That's so many episodes.
And I want to beat the competition. I think the only one doing that to that level quality-wise is probably Rogan.
Yeah.
And I want to be up there. I'm very ambitious, and they're good quality shows. Like, I'm doing full interviews. It's not just like bullshit interviews, the same thing where you see if one celebrity goes on one podcast, he goes on 10 others, you know? So, and my day will come. I'm just going to keep at it, keep growing it, and make it the best I could be.
I also feel like your topic is so interesting and so niche. So I feel like anyone else who's sitting here listening, like, oh, I really want to start something based on a story. I mean, yes, you have to, I think podcasting and interviewing people is certainly a craft and having that on-camera presence. But if you have a story like yours, which is like 0.01% of people, and you're able to spin that into something, I mean, that would, I think, naturally build a following if you also put in the work in comparison to, say, somebody just posting about fashion or business online and just kind of running with it.
Yeah, I think the stories that we share are very interesting. And I think everyone has their place in the world for a podcast. Like, everyone has their own niche. There was a prison genre that came out of COVID, prison TikTok, prison YouTube. And I think I was the first person to really kind of professionalize it in a different way. And you have me, who's been to prison, who is this weird, like, McLovin-looking person with the glasses and the red cheeks. And I interview these people, and I let them talk, and I let them listen. That was one of the biggest hurdles I learned as an interviewer, to just shut up and let them talk. You set them up for the story, because that's what people want to hear. I always tell people, like, some of the guests that come on, you didn't really say, like, 5 words. Was it a bad episode? I said, you did great.
Yeah.
You told your whole story. My job is to sit there, set you up for it, get you comfortable to tell me that story. And you're comfortable because I was in your shoes before. So you're going to tell me your deepest, darkest stories about getting raped in prison or having to stab someone or whatever, because I've been in your shoes.
Have you ever had someone come in and who shares a story and then is reached out to by somebody who works in the prison that they were in, or like saw something online, or does that not happen?
Yeah, people reach out. I've had guards that were I was
Really?
in prison reach out with.
And say what?
They were just like, they were checking up on me or saying good job. Like, I have a huge support. Like, something about my platform is I'm very pro law enforcement. Like, I have law enforcement on, so I have law enforcement reaching out to me all the time. In that and supporting the show, where they'll reach out to people, and people get touched by these stories. They relate. These people are relatable because they're everyday people. It's not the same celebrity. Yeah. And I'd love to have more celebrity stories, the ones that are open about talking to prison. We're talking to people. And I feel like, like what Alex Cooper did when she went to Spotify. She started getting the celebrities, and it kind of expanded her. And I think I'll get to that point, but I'll never forget about the little people, the average stories, because that's why I could do 5 episodes a week, because there's millions of people that went to prison, millions of law enforcement, addicts, all of that. That will never run out, that's always there. And the more I do, the more comfortable people will get.
Yeah.
But when I have more celebrities on that are willing to share their story, that gives people hope.
Who are some of the biggest names that you've had on your show?
Biggest would be Chevy Chase and Brandon Novak. Those are like following-wise big names, but then there's like average people that have crazy stories that have built platforms, like JD DeLay, the cat burglar, Jennifer Gomez. Like there's people like that. Johnny Mitchell has a huge platform that are mainstream in my genre, but not necessarily mainstream in the world. But, we're making connections, we're meeting people, and we will get those celebrities that have been to prison that are willing to talk about it and come on it.
Who are some other people you can think of who are on that celebrity level who have gone to prison? I mean, who would you like to have on your show?
There's a ton. I mean, you have, Mike the Situation, whose agent keeps telling us no. You have Jelly Roll. You have Robert Downey Jr. You have so many people, Tim Allen went to prison. Okay. There's a lot of people, a lot of celebrities. Then you have all like the female, stars and reality TV stars that went to prison. Teresa Giudice, things like that. There's a large variety of people that went to prison.
When they took your phone in prison, you had no access to social media, nothing, right?
Nothing, but there are contraband phones in prison. Okay. So I was on Facebook, guys, or on dating apps.
You're kidding me.
FaceTime, Snapchat.
What is a contraband phone in prison?
It's a cell phone. There's not really iPhones because it's hard to charge them, and you need phones where the batteries pop out, so you could put the battery somewhere else and hide it. You never want to keep because the phones go for thousands of dollars, so you want to keep your phone separate from the battery. If you lose the battery, it only costs a few $100 to replace.
So you had a phone?
Yeah, I had a Boost mobile phone plan, $50 unlimited, and you would hide it, you would do different things, and everyone has a phone, especially at the camps. If you walk down a hallway at night at a camp, everyone's bunk is lit up by the glow.
And the guards don't care.
Oh, they do. I mean, they'll find it, catch you, you'll get in trouble, you get shipped to a higher security prison. But it comes with the territory, They should just give everyone cell phones, and they're doing things where they're giving like iPads to people and whatnot.
So for $50, you don't have to charge this phone, or you have to charge it?
You would. We would take the battery out, put it in a ceiling light like up here, and they would like rig it so it would charge it. It's crazy.
It's kind of like camp. Like it
is camp.
Is it like, yeah, but not a fun camp, right? I mean, what was your favorite meal in that?
We would make a lot of meals. Okay. We would get creative. The chow hall food, kind of the cafeteria food would always suck. I worked in the bakery though. We had like a scratch bakery. Wow. And then people at the smaller facilities, it's more seasoned food and it's better, but we would make and with commissary food and a mixture of stuff we smuggled out, tacos, pizzas, nachos, all these different things. It was really cool.
Like real nachos or like nachos with like Doritos?
That's what we used, not Doritos. They were great. Okay. Yeah, they were great. And then you got your ramen noodles, your cookies. Like it's a whole economy there. I would make cheesecakes as a hustle, non-baked cheesecakes. It was crazy. It was just a different world.
Yeah. And then obviously when you re-enter society coming out of prison, I mean, are you relearning almost how to socialize in a normal way or no?
The system doesn't teach you anything. Halfway houses don't teach you anything. You have to navigate on your own, And I got a job. I worked at Whole Foods for a few years, worked my way up, became a manager, was making great money, was able to rebuild my life. I had a job. I got the car. I had a girlfriend. I had a dog, an apartment. I rebuilt everything. I paid for my own health insurance, car insurance, everything self-sufficient, which is something I really never had before prison. But I learned that all on my own, and you navigate that and you learn, you watch other people, and that's the same thing I've kind of applied to the podcast. I've just watched, listened, learned, and every day I'm tweaking and learning something new.
I was watching the Netflix documentary of the Menendez brothers. Mm-hmm. Did you watch it?
Yeah, I'm still watching it.
What do you think about that particular case?
It's interesting. I don't know. I haven't gotten to the bad parts where it leads the listener to have an alternative opinion, but that's a great example of like there's always more to a story, and you want to see why the person did the things that they did. To me, that's fascinating. What's the psychology behind them? Why did they do that?
I was fascinated as well that both of them got married in prison by people who had like reached out to them.
Yeah, it's huge.
Is that very common?
In the feds, I've met people I've interviewed. I had a prison wife on who, met her husband before and then reached out, and I've met people who've actually reached out to their husband in prison. Some women are into that,
What do you think it is?
I guess it's that kind of like, bad boy aura to them, or they're just interesting. There's a lot of interesting people in prison. They want something different.
Sure.
Every day, like that's why I hate dating apps, because it's like you're competing with all these people and it's the same shit, and you don't really know about someone. But if you're following someone, I always say Instagram's the best dating app, because you see what they got going on in their life. You see they have cool stuff going on. Then you can DM them or whatever. I meet so many people from people that listen to the podcast that get to know me. and like me for my personality, that'll reach out and things like that.
Which I think is a way more wholesome way to do it than, say, a dating app. Because you're right, you're going 100% based on a look, which is just not my...
And you're competing with everyone. You're literally competing with everyone, you know? Why compete with that?
Yeah. So what is one piece of advice you would have for someone who has gone through something really traumatic and wants to, say, do something with their story, but is perhaps scared of posting about it online or following in your footsteps because of what other people would think?
For years after I got out of prison, I never talked about prison. I was embarrassed by it because society is made to, to make you think that it's unacceptable and you don't want to talk about it, which is why I think celebrities don't really necessarily share those stories, and the few that do have found success by sharing it. But the biggest thing that my success has, been based on is sharing my story. I sat in my car making TikToks on a phone. You don't need the fancy gear, sharing stories from prison, stories from my life, my most embarrassing moments. I embraced that and I built a platform from that. And I always tell people that have podcasts that are trying to struggle and figure out how to make it or whatever. And I'm like, you're missing the key element. You're missing your story. Podcasting is going to step further away from the same comedians and the same celebrities that rotate the podcast. Obviously, you'll have the new ones that pop up, like Hawk Tua and stuff, where something goes viral and they'll go on another podcast. But these same people have been on every podcast, and then you have a new pop star that comes up every 6 months that'll do it. It's the same people. Storytelling is the way to go. Sharing regular people's stories, and that's fascinating because other people aren't getting it. There's so many people that come on my platform that no one's ever heard their story before. And that's the winning formula, and I'm going to keep rolling with that. So don't be afraid to share your story.
I find that very interesting that, anyone really can have gone through something, and not everyone decides to make a platform from it, right? But everyone has such an interesting story with something they've gone from. I also notice I get pitched tons of guests all the time, and I've started realizing lately, like, oh, shit, this person has been on 15 podcasts, and, like, how... It would be impossible on the 15th podcast for your whole spin, right? If this celebrity has been on 18 other ones in the past week to be any different. So I've started to notice that. So I feel like a lot of talent that have a publicist take them down that route, it's actually less enticing to a host to have them on. Would you say that's true?
I think it all depends. I don't use a publicist. I don't do any of that. I reach out to people. I'm very hands-on. People have full access to me. I try to make myself different in that. I'll give out my number. I'll respond to as many DMs as possible. There's so many people that are celebrities that won't even respond to a DM. You're not really building a fan base. I'm spend so many hours of my day responding to comments, messages, DMs, setting up people. Like, I'll message someone and be like, hey, I saw your request come into my email. Do you want to come on? They're like, is this really Ian? So I'm so hands-on, and that'll never change. No matter how big I get, like, I'm always going to be that because that's what makes this what it is.
How much research do you then do before having a guest on?
I do very limited research. When I first started, I would type up questions and go into it. Now I just need to know the baseline of their story. Is it a prison story? Is it an addiction story? Do they have a crazy crime story where, I'm going to spend 2 hours just focusing on the crime and we'll brush through prison? Or did they do something like that's every day, maybe rob a car, whatever, something that's not as interesting, but their prison story is crazy. And I think that's what makes every episode different, because I might spend on this episode 2 hours of how they rob banks, and then this one is 2 hours of surviving prison gangs. So I think it's so different. And then you have the law enforcement and you have the professionals and this and that. It's like, it's something new every time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Because the name of the show is called Dare to be Fearless, I have to ask you what makes you fearless. So, Ian, what makes you fearless?
I think it's just like seeing the hard work kind of like pay off and knowing in my heart that this is what I'm supposed to be doing after everything. Like, I literally lost everything, rebuilt it and lost it all again when I gave up my job to do this and, put myself into debt to figure this out and then see it come to life. Like, it was just a grind. And to get to where I'm at now and be where I'm at now, it makes you more confident and makes you know that you have something. Yeah. And I'm just going to keep working on that.
It feels like you have a gut intuition, which I think is what makes people really successful. I mean, I've never met anyone that doesn't. Everyone I know who believes in themselves, like to their bone, right, which is 0.01% of people, which is why I think some people become entrepreneurs and some people don't. There's a different mindset in being able, as you said, to go through the debt and the highs and the lows to become successful, because so many people give up because it's incredibly hard.
You have to fail to succeed. You really have to. And I always believed that at a young age, and I didn't know that those failures weren't the failures that were going to take me to the success, because I had to keep failing and keep learning, but it got me to where I'm at now.
Where can everyone find more about you and the show and whatnot on social media?
If they just go to ianbick.com, that links to everything. And you Google, it all comes up. It's either Ian Bick CT or just Ian_Bick or Ian Bick on everything. But the website can link to my episodes, which are on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, my social media, and all of that.
I'll link them as well below in the notes. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm so glad that I watched that, because I remember actually the HBO one, there was multiple people. You're right. I think Anna had
10 episodes. They didn't get Anna, though. They did like a knockoff
of her.
I actually had Syed on my show recently.
Who's that?
He had one of the episodes. Okay. He was the teenage Ponzi scheme guy, the college Ponzi.
I think I remember
He has a crazy story, went to prison, all of that. So he was on the show. It was cool to reconnect and see the growth,
Yeah.
Because when we all did that, we were young, we were fresh out of prison. Yeah. The mindset's changed.
Yeah.
So we have different outlooks on life now.
No, of course. That was how many years ago?
2019 we filmed it, or 2020 we filmed it, came out in 21.
Yeah. And you also said that it's not out anymore, so if someone wants it, they can just DM you.
If they DM me, I send them the private link.
Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. If you want more from Dare to Be Fearless, head to the show notes. I link everything there. And, of course, because this particular episode has to do with the justice system, I'm on the board of the Innocence Project in London. And if you're interested in knowing more about how to get involved with helping people who are incarcerated, also that will be in the show notes as well. And I'll see you back next week for a new episode of Dare to Be Fearless.